NAR has proposed a settlement of $418 million to settle the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit. Now, we're going to cover the lawsuit itself very briefly, but this video is really more about solutions, more about what real estate agents can focus on from the limited information that we have right now and implement into our businesses in order to actually thrive in this environment of uncertainty, of chaos, of whatever you want it to be. So if you've been on social media at any time today and in the very near foreseeable future, there are going to be Facebook groups that are going to have, being a moderator right now on Facebook groups, I don't envy you. Every single post that goes absolutely viral when you bring up this settlement. You have a lot of opinions, a lot of what people perceive to be facts. You have a lot of different things that are being posted that are just a lot of noise, right? And then you also have every single headline from any publication out there, whether they're real estate related or not real estate related. They just are putting up some headlines that are ridiculous. So just type in realtor and then go to the news tab on Google and you're going to see exactly what we're talking about. But today we're looking at solutions. Today we're looking at what are some opportunities that you can create for yourself. We're looking at ways that we can actually adapt as agents and how we can position ourselves to make even more money, how we can actually implement things in our businesses today so we can generate more income tomorrow. And yes, that is something that is going to happen for a lot of real estate agents that are aware of what's happening and can implement and adapt and really pivot, which is essentially what's going to happen right now, or what should be happening right now. Because remember, not everything that is happening right now is going to be, and something is never absolutely good and absolutely bad. There's something in the middle, right? So you're not going to have this absolute huge thing that's going to do away with buyer's agents. At least this isn't it. And you're also not going to have something that's completely super positive that everybody gets free money, right? So that's just not going to happen. There's some middle ground that's ultimately gonna come of this. So again, we're gonna focus on solutions, but one thing that the reason I'm making this particular video, and there's gonna be more and more as we get more information, the reason I'm making this video is twofold. One, you're gonna start getting calls. You're gonna start getting shares of all these publications. The New York Times was the first one to break this news, and they reached millions of people. And then Yahoo News, and then every single real estate, so many different publications that your clients, your past clients, your future clients, your leads, everybody has access to this information now. Now they're reading these headlines. So they're going to be sharing those articles with you. They're going to be sharing this. Like, hey, they're going to be texting you, hey, have you heard about this? Right? So you, aka we, aka me, we need to have an understanding of what's happening so we can convey what's actually happening as opposed to what they're reading in the headline, because they're not going to go into the article and read it. Let's be honest. This is a headline culture, so we need to be able to articulate what's actually happening right now. So that's why I'm going to give you a few talking points and breaking down what the history is in a very simple to understand, very, very concise way. So you understand kind of what's happening right now. If this is the first time that you're actively participating and learning of what's going on, we've been covering this particular situation since January 1st. Since January 1st, we've been putting out daily content. We've been putting out daily content about this, so we're pretty well versed in what's happening at the moment. This doesn't necessarily shock us by any stretch of the imagination, so I'm going to try to get you into the right temperature as to what this actually means and what it's going to do for your business, which is actually point number 2. I want to share with you how we can navigate the waters right now, right? So number 1, need to be aware of what's happening so we can articulate this to the clients and people that are going to be sharing these articles with us. Because if they're the ones that are letting you know about, let me put it this way. If you're watching this video because somebody shared an article with you and it's the first time that you're learning on the topic, then you're welcome. But also, no, I'm kidding. But also, that shouldn't be the case, right? So don't get caught flat-footed. And the second thing is we're going to look at some ways to actually navigate, move forward, and actually see movement in our business for the better. So just a very, 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 very brief history lesson when it comes to this particular case. There's major implications in the near future and also in historical as well. We've covered those in other videos, and there's going to be some additional videos, but this one is just a very brief synopsis of why we're here and how we're here, just so you at least understand what this verdict actually means. Not the verdict, the proposed settlement. The verdict already happened. So the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit, this is the lawsuit that really kicked it off. This is a class action lawsuit that kicked off the whole wave. That's why you have NAR being implicated or named in 23 plus over 20. I lost count. Over 20 lawsuits that NAR has been named in as a defendant in relation to commission. So in relation to commission fixing, so price fixing, or this collusion that real estate agents are inflating the value of homes basically because of our collusion and all that fun stuff, or at least their allegement, I guess. Is that a word? Allegement? Which of course we don't believe that's the case. But anyway, so in the Sitzer-Burnett lawsuit, there was 5 entities that were named. So that was Anywhere Real Estate, so Anywhere. It was RE/MAX, Keller Williams, NAR, and Home Services of America. So Home Services. Those were the first entities. Now, there's been more. Immediately after the verdict was read late last year, the verdict came down where we ultimately lost. We being the brokers and NAR ended up losing. After that, like pretty much within hours, another lawsuit rounding up another batch of brokers were named in this lawsuit, such as eXp Realty and other brokerages. But anyway, let's focus on this one because this is what the settlement's about. So those are the 5 entities that were originally named. Well, after the dust settled, so whenever the lawsuit was filed, we had Anywhere and we had RE/MAX settle before it actually went to trial. So you had Anywhere settled for about $83 million, and then you had RE/MAX settle for about $55 million before it went to trial. So we didn't know the verdict of what if it was going to be the defendants are going to win or the plaintiffs are going to win. We didn't have that outcome yet. So these 2 entities, these 2 brokerages, they settled before it even happened. And in the verdict, the defendants lost, aka the remaining entities, which is NAR, which is Keller Williams, which is Home Services, ended up losing. And when that happened, it essentially meant the industry lost, because that set off a chain of events, a chain of copycat commission suits that you're going to see be named here moving forward. Those started coming along. So there's going to be every attorney started firing up the printing press and started and did the whole copy and paste, and then find the address of this courtroom that we're going to file this lawsuit in, and try to get as many people that were implicated or were affected, aka anybody that sold a home, so they could try to get another class action status. But anyway, let's continue. I'm going to get to the part where we actually make some adjustments and something that's going to be valuable to you. This is not going to be one of those that I was about to say the house is on fire, but that's probably not the best analogy to use, especially in real estate. Let's continue. So we had those 3 entities per se that on paper they lost. You had NAR, you had Keller Williams, you had Home Services. Now, about a month ago, Keller Williams came out and they settled. They settled for $70 million. Mind you, at this point, the verdict that was rendered at that time was $1.8 billion in damages, which could be treble damages, which would amount to over $5 billion in damages, which essentially would be paid out, right? So we talked about NAR and how they had insurance, and the insurance was certainly not going to cover this amount, and their renewal of the license was coming up here in a couple of weeks, and chances are it was not going to have the professional liability cover even a portion of this. But anyway, I keep going down the rabbit hole because there's just so much to this, and I'll make sure I have a complete recap of everything. But I'm just trying to get you up to speed on what's happening right now, to where ultimately what happened today in terms of that we know of, and then we're going to get into some solutions. So if you can hang in there with me, I really appreciate it, because it's going to be valuable as you understand the context, at least in this brief summary. I keep saying brief. I don't know how long the video's going already. Yeah, we're 10 minutes in. I promise we'll get to something very, very juicy, but hopefully you're appreciating and enjoying the breakdown. So now, so up until this point, remember anywhere, and we had Remax settled before the lawsuit. After the lawsuit, we had, which was lost, it was $1.8 billion in damages, which could have gone up to over $5 billion in damages. We would know what ultimately it would end up being here in a couple of weeks when the court determines what that would be, which hasn't happened yet. So a month ago, Keller Williams settled for $70 million. And what's really has all the Facebook groups bumping right now, it has all the Reddit groups up in arms right now, it has everybody, every real estate agent out there having a comment and an opinion on something that they weren't really paying attention to up until 9:30 Eastern time when the New York Times broke the news, and then they got an email from NAR directly a couple of minutes after. What has everybody up in arms right now is the NAR proposed settlement. So the National Association of Realtors, remember, NAR and Home Services are still here. They hadn't settled up until now. So now you have NAR proposing a $418 million settlement. That's a proposal. It still needs to be approved by the court. And we know that in these situations, it's not a done deal, because we reported on a story, maybe it was 3 weeks ago, where we had the Department of Justice trying to decouple the commissions right out of the gate. And essentially there was already a settlement of some kind already established, but they came in and said, no, we're going to be doing this and we're going to do it this way. And they're essentially creating laws. I'm going down a rabbit hole, so let's stay on topic, Jaime. So you have this situation where NAR went out and made this proposal, and they try to cover as much ground, to their credit. I know everybody likes to rag on NAR, even members themselves. There's a 70% disapproval rating of NAR overall, but to their credit, they try to blanket as many possible entities, as many possible agents, as many folks that were actually not even NAR members, try to help them in some way. Now, that blanket that they try to put over the entire real estate agent license basically wasn't going to fly. There's some exceptions to the settlement that they proposed, but the high notes when it comes to the NAR settlement is you're essentially going to need a buyer rep agreement. Some of you are very used to doing that right now. So now we're getting into the immediate things that have changed in terms of the industry per se. So the NAR settlement, you're going to need a buyer rep agreement. There's no way around it at this point. Before you ever open up a lockbox, you have to have a buyer rep agreement at this point. Now, here's the thing. Not all states require that. Not all states even have one. So either your brokerage is going to need to come up with one, NAR is going to have to come up with one, or in terms of like gets widely adopted, or the state's going to need to come up with one. But there is going to be some sort of written agreement that needs to be executed before a lockbox gets open. So that's one thing that we do know is really it's a contingency of the settlement, if you will. So it's something that, again, still needs to get approved by the court in order for that to happen. But that's something that, if you're not used to buyer rep agreements, get very, very used to them. They are a way of life for you moving forward. So that's one thing to know. The second major thing here is the compensation, right? So there's a lot of comments out there right now saying that the seller's not going to pay buyer commissions or anything like that. Now, that is not true, right? So what ended up happening here in terms of the settlement, I wrote this down because I did not want to get this wrong. Prohibiting offers of compensation on the MLS. So essentially, for sure, it was something that we know that it's going to be done away with is in your MLS, whenever you're searching up properties, there's a little field that says buyer agent commission. Don't count on that being there any longer, because that's going to go away here within hours, basically. I say hours. It's going to be days into weeks. But that field is no longer going to be there. And that means that with the compensation, that's going to be needed, that has to be treated off platform, off the MLS. because that was a big sticking point in the lawsuit. That's where the price fixing was happening. That's where people were they made the claim that agents were not showing homes because they were getting lower commissions, and they were affecting the consumer at the end of the day. So there's a lot of different things. We've covered this in the past. So again, just not going to get into it. I'm not going to relitigate this because we've already litigated it. No need to relitigate it today. But anyway, the offers of compensation is not going to be done on the MLS any longer. It has to be done off platform, basically. So there's several components to that, because we have to recognize that the way that we get compensated is going to change, but it really is more of how you're going to communicate that change. So we'll talk about what those look like here as we get into our solutions. And when it comes to when these changes are going to happen, how quickly you need to adapt, which goes to point number 2 that we were talking about. So point number 1, you need to be aware of what this even means, what's been happening, what this verdict actually is. So that's why we went through the history of it. But the second thing is having a game plan of what to do moving forward. Well, here's how quickly you need to adapt. By mid-July is when they're planning to have all of these changes be ideally before, but by mid-July is when you're looking at the changes actually being done, right? So MLSs are the coders of the MLS people, like the MLS coders, they're working overtime. There's people that write contracts, they're working overtime because that's going to be changing considerably. There's a lot of different things that are going to change, and the changes need to happen sooner rather than later. And when I say need to, this is a proposed settlement that hasn't been cleared by the courts yet. And it's something that there is an expectation from what I'm reading and seeing all the legal opinions on it. There's the expectation that it's going to look very similar to what's being proposed, but we don't know until we know at that point. Just know that the changes by this summer, you need to have better scripts. You need to have better talking points. You need to have, well, let's get into the solution. So solution number 1, or one thing that we need to do in order to adapt and actually thrive in this particular market right here and right now, establish your value proposition. Establish what it is that you actually do. Be clear on what you actually bring to the table. Oftentimes we just took it for granted that a cousin calls us and said, "Hey, can you help me buy a home? I heard that you're a real estate agent," but from my mom, which would be your aunt. And you say, "Absolutely." And you haven't done a transaction in the last 12 months. Now, I'm not saying anything that's not true. We know that there are agents out there that do that are essentially hobbyist agents that keep their license active, or maybe they are trying. Let's give the benefit of the doubt. Agents do try, of course, obviously, but agents that are doing 0 to 1 to 2 transactions a year, well, we've been taken as a given that all we'd have to do now is all we would have to do. I understand there's much to it, but we would log into the MLS, and as long as we were able to negotiate, bring everything to the table, and make sure that the transaction got clear to close, we were guaranteed a commission, whatever that happens to be. No one was out here commission fixing, but we understood that there was an implied contract with what was shown on the MLS, whether it was 1%, 2%, 3%, 1,000,000%, whatever it happens to be. We understood that we were going to get compensated. So now there's not necessarily that guarantee, which we'll talk about the different options of compensation. So now you need to establish your value proposition. This is what I'm getting to. You need to be clear on what you bring to the table. One of the best ways that you can actually convey the value is by having real life case studies, by having real life testimonials to your name, by having real life situations in where you have successfully helped somebody purchase a home and how you were able to help them transform their life in terms of establishing a valuable asset that they can convert into wealth, or that they're building wealth with, right? So what we do is, from the consumer standpoint, a lot of people think that we're door openers, and some of us we act like it. Some of us do act like it. Let's be real. But beyond that, we understand that that's not the reality. So we need to be able to clearly articulate what it is that we bring to the table, because very, very, very soon you're going to need to be able to articulate to that to somebody that is strapped for cash, that is going to really have to look at very seriously if they can even afford your services. Now, I understand that this lawsuit was supposed to protect the consumer, and we understand that there's a lot of individuals that are impacted to the negative side, they're not going to be able to afford services. Again, let's just be real. That's what's going to happen. But I digress. So you're going to need to be able to negotiate from the buyer side. So the clients that you're working with, you're going to need to be able to negotiate how you're going to get compensated and be very clear on what it is that you're going to be doing. Now, were we supposed to be doing this already? 100% we were supposed to be doing this already. But were we? No, we still have agents out there saying that my services are free. That's still being said. Like if you just go to any Facebook group and type in free, you're gonna see a lot of people making that claim that, hey, as a buyer's agent, my services are free. I get compensated by somebody that's not you. Anyway, let's continue. Establishing your value proposition is so important right now more than ever. The obvious thing that you're gonna hear quite a bit, but we have to state out the obvious here. Focusing on listings is it's such a really good investment of your time moving forward. How can I generate listings? How can I become more of a listing agent? How can I actually be on that side of the table that, don't mishear me, things are going to change in the way that you do listing presentations, because you're also going to have to adjust the buyer. You're also going to have to address the buyer compensation in these presentations as well. You also have to be able to articulate that if this is the price of my services, Mr. and Mrs. Home Seller. Now, if we want to position our home to be competitive, to bring us as many folks as possible, we also need to bring in a commission for the buyer's agent, or consider, we don't have to, but consider bringing in offering a buyer agent commission in the event that a buyer that is qualified to get the loan, but might not be qualified or have the disposable income to request and hire a professional service from a real estate agent from the buyer side, so we can attract them, right? So from the listing agent, it's not going to solve all of your problems for that reason I just mentioned, that you're also going to need to articulate why there's going to be, or why they should consider offering buyer agent commission. Because again, the homeowners, more than even buyers, homeowners are reading these headlines and it's becoming very appealing to them. And not to mention that they're getting all these postcards and letters from attorneys saying, hey, join this class action lawsuit. Turns out there's some money in here for you, which is not going to be much, given that just from the previous settlements prior to the settlement from NAR, they were taking 42 something % of the overall take. It was like $82 million, the attorneys, that is, from what was already settled, which again was Anywhere, which was Remax, which was Keller Williams, right? So of those judgments, that was $83 million, $55 million, and $70 million. They were taking 82%, or they were praying that the court would consider that, because they were working on a contingency fee. Oh, we're going down a lot of rabbit holes, right? I'm telling you, there's so many tentacles to this. I'm trying to get to the point, but there's some elements here that I want to introduce to you, because this is the first time that some of you might be hearing about this in a meaningful way, outside of just disparagements on social media, outside of just some hot takes and all this other stuff. Like, that's why we listing agents have always been bringing anyway, from the listing side, you need to be able to articulate the commission from the other side, right? And in your presentation. But the second thing that a lot of listing agents, especially the braggadocious ones that you're seeing out there, second thing that they're not considering is that, well, when you sell a home, well, guess what? The seller now becomes a buyer, unless they plan to go homeless. So there's that additional thing. So the conversations that are had by the listing agent, yes, they're of course super important. And yes, you want to be in those rooms. You want to be in that living room doing that listing presentation at the end of the day. But you also want to consider, well, what's going to be our game plan whenever we go and purchase? Because you may have the power right now in terms of whatever power you have at the moment, or what you're offering or not offering, but you're going to turn right around and you're going to look to purchase. So you, as the listing agent, you're going to be on that side of the table as well. So you also need to understand how to talk to now future buyers on how your services are going to be covered. unless you plan. Well, anyway, I was going to give a bad example, which I don't want people to think that that's going to be the blueprint. So I'll stop. Focus on listings, right? So that's something that is valuable just to begin with. That's something that we as agents have always seen as a holy grail. We've all heard list to last. That's something that has been around for ages. Now it takes on another meaning. The third thing to consider, so again, establish your value proposition. That's very, very clear right now, because it's going to help you with communication. It's going to help you with your presentation and negotiation skills with buyers, because you're going to need that. You're going to need it. Number two is focusing on listings. We've known that for a while. We've known that forever. We'll always continue knowing that. So just focus on listings. That's something that is absolutely critical. The third thing that I want to suggest to you is consider doing new construction, right? Consider looking at new build homes, right? So we still bring over 70% of the homes that are sold, the new homes that are sold, are brought on by an agent at minimum, right? So builders still require us to bring them clients, still require us to bring them people that will buy, and they're still offering compensation for you, right? So if you've looked at new construction in the past and maybe just thought, this isn't for me, I don't really understand these contracts that these builders are saying, I don't really understand these guidelines that they have, I don't want to get cheated out of my commission from builders, I don't like the fact that NAR gives 1% or offers 1%, nobody gives anything, offers 1%. I recognize that. But new construction, there's still hundreds of thousands of homes transactions that happen every single year. And for that side of the equation, here's a dirty little secret. There's some builders out there that will do a certain permission plus a little bit more in bonus, right? So for you, a client that could go to a resale, they can still go to a resale, obviously, but maybe you weren't as gung-ho of introducing them to a new build, right? So there's still that consideration. So new construction is still something that is widely underutilized, and right now it would be a really good option for you and your clients, not just for you, but and your clients, because they get a brand new home, they have warranties, they get help with closing costs. Because remember, the folks that are going to be mostly impacted by this particular verdict are the people that don't have as much income, right? So if they would love to work with you if they could afford you, they would love that. But since they can't, they're gonna have to just try to go at it on their own, right? And we, of course, that's something that they've been doing from builders from day one. So that's why we want to be in that equation and helping them with the builders as well. Or I don't want to say against the builders, but you want to be the advocate for the buyer as they're purchasing new, right? So that's the third thing to look at and consider doing for your business, really pivoting into new construction. That's a niche that I've loved for a long time. If you go to my marketing channel that speaks to real estate agents, specifically just Jaime Resendez, you're going to see all the videos that I've done on new construction, right? So I work with builders. We actually launch marketing campaigns for national marketing campaigns for builders with our digital agency. Going down a rabbit hole. Let's stick to the plan, Jaime. Number 4 is having price options. So having pricing options, have a menu, have a in a way a fee-based menu, right? So there's some folks that would love to work with you, but they can't. So remember, here's a big part that was being misinterpreted. I'll put it that way. It was misinterpreted. The seller can still compensate you as a buyer's agent. They can still do that. The thing that has changed was when this contract, instead of it being on the MLS basically by the commission split that was the percentage that was being offered to you, that's off MLS, right? So a seller can still compensate for your services. So there's really three ways that you can get your money. One, directly from the buyer, right? So you negotiate that. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I'm going to charge you X fee to purchase a home. Or I'm going to charge you X percentage of the home's value. Once we find that home, we lock it in. I'm going to negotiate. I'm going to bring you so much value. I'm going to actually make sure that you're protected. So Mr. and Mrs. Home Buyer, I'm going to do this for you. Now, depending on that payment, or the payment's going to be dependent on the terms that you agree, and I need this wired to my account today, or I need this whenever we close at the table. that essentially what I don't get too caught up in how that's going to look like, because there's still ambiguity on how you can actually work that. But you have the buyer negotiation directly, right? So the second thing that you could do is concessions from sellers. Whenever you're presenting your offer, here's the offer for the house and here's the offer for the services. If you can do a seller concession, homeowner, that would be greatly appreciated so we can move forward, right? So you do seller concessions all of the time, especially in the land of higher interest, because there's a lot of seller concessions happening with the sellers were offering to a certain rebate, a certain amount money back, so the buyer could buy down the interest rate, or so the buyer could have some money to buy some furniture, or so as to cover the closing costs for the buyer, right? So in the land of higher interest rates, we saw a lot of those seller concessions. That's not new. So your commission can actually be negotiated into the deal in that respect. Now, also, a portion of the listings, the listing broker's compensation can also still be sent to you, or you could earn it that way, if you will. So from the listing agreements, just the way that it has been happening right now, whatever that listing agent secured the listing at, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 30%, whatever it happens to be. I'm being facetious with those. Hopefully you're catching that, because the whole price fixing thing, I can't, there's no such thing as a set fee that we as agents were required to charge. That just did not exist. And had we been able to articulate that a little bit better, maybe in the courts, we wouldn't be having this video. But I digress. Anyway, the compensation from the portion of the listing broker's agreement, which is how it's happening right now, that's something that can continue happening, right? So whatever the listing agreement is at, let's just call it for 5%. Half of that can still go over to the buyer's agent. So again, it's because you're on the listing side doesn't necessarily keep you or insulate you from these conversations. You are going to have these conversations. One, from the listing agreement. And then also you're going to have that from when you're helping that homeowner go out and buy, right? So having pricing options is what I'm saying, right? So having pricing options are what you're willing to do at certain price points, what you're not willing to do at certain price points. Almost having like a consulting model is also on the table, right? Because we understand that maybe they can't afford your full service, but they can afford guidance. They can afford advisory or advice, if you will. But unfortunately for you as a business decision, you are not able to take them on as a full-time client, right? So it's your decision to make. And that's having pricing options in terms of what you offer to your clients is being explored more than ever. This is something we've had conversations with mega brokers months and months ago. It was early this time last year. We were having conversations on different options on how to work with buyers in different scenarios, different landscapes. So now more than ever, the individuals that launch this consulting-based model and or different price tiers, if you will, in terms of full service, limited service, consulting, they're having some great success, especially right now. So that's something to consider. Or have pricing options is the fourth thing that I wanted to share. And the fifth thing is a little bit harder to put your arms around, but it's something that is much easier now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And that's really having a mechanism to attract people to you. So you could call that a personal brand. You can call that an inbound funnel. You can call that, let's call it personal brand, because this can go in so many different ways, but having a way to make yourself attractive to people. And the easiest way to do that is by building a personal brand, providing value to people, and actually helping people en masse. Now more than ever, you have that opportunity. There's social media, there's YouTube, there's blogging, there's ways to get your voice out without having to purchase a huge commercial or purchase a huge billboard or purchase whatever and just do marketing. Now you have value-based content that you can share with people. So those reels, they go mega viral. Those YouTube videos can go mega viral, and hopefully you hit that like button so this video goes mega viral. The blogs can have a lot of people reading them at once and reaching out to you. So the more attractive that you make yourself from providing value, the more people are going to gravitate towards you, the more that they're willing to pay a premium to work for you. So the extreme example, not work for you, work with you. So extreme example is the Ryan Serhants of the world, right? So the mega folks that you see on TVs, if you will, where people would actually pay handsomely for that individual to work their transaction because they perceive that person to bring that much more value. Whether it's true or not, it's not for me to decide, but the perception is there. So the more attractive, the more value that you can bring to people, the more attractive that you become. So building your personal brand is more important than ever. But as mentioned, it's easier more than ever because you have all these vehicles, right? So you have the Reels of the world, you have Facebook, you have maybe not TikTok, because right now there's consideration of banning. There's a lot of uncertainty, guys. There's a lot of uncertainty. But, starting your YouTube channel, maybe this is that moment. Starting that YouTube channel where you put out valuable information and share information that people actually can benefit from. Hey, maybe you can't afford a buyer's agent right now. So here's some tips on how to negotiate. Here's some tips on how to actually get under contract. Here's some tips on how to blah, blah, blah. Right? Same thing with the blogging, same thing posting on social media. The more information that you put out there for free that's actually helpful to people, the more helpful people are going to be to you. That's actually a really good line. I'm going to have to watch this one back because that could be a shirt. It's really about providing that value. The one thing, folks, that I really implore you not to do is to be that type of agent that says, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. If you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to be out of business. I recognize the sentiment like, oh, I'm still going to help people and all this other stuff, but you have to adapt. You have to change. This is a new way of doing business. Regardless of how much business you're generating right now, there are changes that you need to make in your business. If you have no business, then change something because obviously what you're doing right now is not working. But if you have a ton of business, you still need to change because you have to adapt. This is something that is going to impact you one way, shape, or another. This is impacting the entire industry. Now, again, this isn't a doomsday message. This also isn't the life is perfect message. There's somewhere in between, right? So the pessimists are going to be pessimists. The optimists are going to be optimists. There's some in between here of where this ultimately shakes out. The one thing that I want to ask you is to be flexible, adapt, and know that this is a change regardless of whether you want it or not. So just take action, pivot, be flexible, and really that's all I have. So let me know in the comment section down below what you think is ultimately going to happen. There's going to be some additional videos that I have queued up here. Let's see if I can get to them real quickly. No, I can't. There's a lot of additional videos that I'm going to break down. I'm going to break down the entire history of this particular, like the full history of what this means contextually, where this is coming from, where I see this going. I just want to provide you some solutions. There's other things that it's going to be another video where I drop that shares everything that people are getting wrong right now. And again, there's a lot more questions than answers at this point, but I would much rather provide you the certain things that have happened and are happening right now, as opposed to theoretical stuff that's just not going to work. Anyway, let me know in the comment section down below what your opinion is. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on your way out. I'll talk to you on the next one.